Hey, it's Catherine. Welcome back to Grief Inspired. And today we're talking about navigating grief and loss. And if you have lost someone that you love and are devastated by loss, I want you to know that this is the place for you. What Grief Inspired aims to do is ease the pain of your loss and give you the hope that you need to keep on living. Talking about navigating grief and loss, and today I want to give you 5 tips, 5 things to think about as you begin navigating your grief journey, or maybe if you're further along in your grief journey, things to go back and contemplate as you move forward. And I hope that you are moving forward in your grief, because that is what we want to help you do here. We want to help you keep on living. So tip number 1 is know that grieving and grief is hard. Grieving the loss of someone that you love, someone that's close to you, someone who means the world to you, whether it's sudden or not, is likely one of the most challenging things that you'll ever have to go through. And so I want you to think about it for a minute and think of all of the challenging things that you've been through. Right? If I use my life as a case study, I just moved. This is my new home in Virginia Beach. Moving is hard. Getting laid off from your job, or in my case, terminated because there isn't any money, that is hard. If you think about going through a divorce, I've had one of those. That is hard. But what I can say without a doubt is that losing my son and the grief that came along with that loss and trying to figure out how to keep on living was the hardest undertaking of my life. If you are going through grief and loss and trying to navigate that grief and loss, know that it's hard. You may have people around you that can't appreciate how hard it is for you. And I think we've all been there. None of us can really appreciate how hard grieving is until we're the ones who are going through it. One of the things I love about the Grief Inspired community that I've created is that every person who has gone through grief and loss and who's gotten support now feels obligated to reach out to other people. They want to help because they know how hard it is. I have one person who is still devastated because he feels terrible that he didn't know and that it had happened to someone else, and he wished he had been there for them. But you can't know until you're here, until these are the shoes that you're standing in, the shoes of grief, the shoes of loss. So tip number 1 is know that it's hard. Tip number 2 is you have to grieve. Oftentimes, our gut reaction to grief and loss, and I think this holds true for men and women, old and young, is sometimes to push it off, to power through, to act like it's not as big as it is, to walk around and say, I'm fine. But are you really fine? If you go back to tip number 1, grief is hard. So you have to grieve. There is a process to grief. It takes time. It takes support. It is everything that this grief-inspired community is designed to help you with. It is hard, and you have to grieve. One of our key tenets is get your grief out, right? There are things that you need to do as you go through the grief process. The first one is get your grief out. We talk about a lot more in the courses that I run, but the first one is you have to find a way to get your grief out. What does that mean? You have to be able to talk about your grief with someone who understands. Working with counselors, I think it's a phenomenal thing to do. I love therapy myself. I have a lot of people though who have gone to therapists and have said, well, they really just don't understand. And you can't fault the therapist for that. If they haven't been through grief themselves, then it's going to be really hard for them to help you. So the best thing that you can do, and that's why the second tip, is to actually grieve. Get your grief out. Find someone who you can talk to so that you can hear yourself share your story. And we oftentimes need to share our story over and over again. My infant son died 14 years ago. It's going to be 14 years this coming January. And I'll tell you what, I shared his story again this morning, and it still gets me. Sometimes up here, sometimes in my gut. That feeling is not going to go away, but what is going to go away is how I process it, how now I can share it, because I've shared my story so many times over and over again. Or tip number 3 is to connect with others. When you are navigating grief and loss, the best thing that you can do is listen to other people's stories and let those people listen to your story. So it goes hand in hand with get your grief out, but then it's finding the right people and connecting with them. We at the Grief Inspired Community, I'm promoting this buddy system. And what I tell people in the group, in the school.com community, so it's school.com, SKOOL, if you haven't been there yet. In the Grief Inspired Community, I encourage you to find a buddy. Find someone that you can text with or email with on a regular basis. And what I'm talking about is that connection is not just once in the moment. What I'm saying is find a buddy, somebody that you can walk your journey of grief with, in addition to the rest of the community, where you can do some texting and you can say, how's it going today? And they can say the same thing of you, and you can share, oh, I was just triggered. This happened to me. It's a way to continue to get your grief out, connect in a really meaningful way so that you are heard and you are hearing someone else. We do all kinds of groups in the community. We have support classes, support groups, Q&A sessions. All of those things are available over on school.com, SKOOL.com. They are free to join right now. They will not be free forever. It can be a paid platform. That is where I am headed so that I can give you a lot of content, a lot of courses, a lot of my time to work with you to help you on your grief journey. It is the best way to connect, and it's the best tip, honestly. It's tip number 3, but it is the best tip. You need to connect with other people. Tip number 4, and I love this one so much. I know a lot of you who find me, who watch my channel, are highly educated, intelligent, empathetic, success-oriented people. You've done great things in your life. You have meaningful careers. You've taken care of your families. You've taken care of your parents. You've taken care of your children. You typically serve all of the people around you. And tip number 4 is to have a plan for your grief. And what do I mean by that? Have a plan to move forward. We talk about keep on living. When you go through the grief process and you lose someone that you love, you might not be aware of this, but you at some point have to decide, do I want to keep on living? Do I want to keep going? And you might not want to keep living without them, but at some point you have to choose and say, this is the reality I'm in. I don't want to believe it, but I'm going to have to. And I need to figure out how to move forward. And so I want to encourage you to have a plan and set goals. How do you want to move forward? How do you want to feel? Do you want to just be okay? Do you want to just get a good night's sleep because you can't seem to sleep? Do you want to release the guilt that you're feeling? Something that you did do, something that you didn't do. Having a plan and setting goals for yourself is going to help you know where you're going. Grief is a very uncertain time, and if you're like me, I liked certainty. And so one of the mantras that we say here at Grief Inspired is control the things that you can control. And so having a plan and setting some goals for how you want to feel and what you want to accomplish and what you want to learn about yourself and your grief and what you actually want your life to look like moving forward. Again, this all takes time. It's not something you do overnight, but having a plan and setting goals is really going to drive you forward, and it's going to serve you as you navigate grief and loss. Tip number 5 is find support. Do not try to do this on your own. I tried in the beginning to do it on my own. Again, I told you it was 14 years ago when I lost my son, and I was devastated by my grief. What I found on YouTube was very clinical. These are the 5 stages of grief. I wanted somebody to talk to me about grief. I wanted somebody to explain to me what my grief was, what was normal, what was not normal, when I should start to worry. That's what all of my videos here are, is to help you as you navigate that grief and loss. When I really found support, I was very fortunate to find a counselor who had the tools and skills to help me figure out who I was now that my child had died and who I wanted to be. Because suddenly for me, all I wanted was a child. And when I didn't have my son anymore, the rest of what I had built, my career and my home and all of the things that I had around me that I was very fortunate for, they really didn't seem to matter. And so I had to re-engineer my entire life and what was most important to me. And I've even gotten to a place now where I've said, I'm not really sure I want my corporate job anymore. And they did me a favor and they told me, we don't need you anymore, or we don't have enough money to pay you. And so here I am, new on my journey, figuring out how to make a go of making enough money to support myself in helping all of you. It's scary. And I'll tell you what, 14 years ago, I never in a million years would have thought that this is where I would be sitting. First of all, I'm in Virginia Beach. I did not think that would be happening. Second of all, I didn't think that my dad would have died a year ago. I made the assumption that he was just going to live for a lot longer than he did. I didn't know. And I chose digging into the grief journey, and now I call my business Grief Inspired because my grief inspired me to want to help other people. I got through some of my grief and I said, wow, if I had just known some of these things, grieving would have been so much less painful. And so that's why I say here, I want to ease the pain of your grief, giving you the information and tools that you need and the support that you deserve. That's tip number 5. It's going to help you navigate your grief and loss. And that's what I want to encourage you. If this has been helpful, I want you to head over to the Grief Inspired community at school.com. I have time now, and I'm so excited with all of the things that are going to start dropping in there. Now is the time to get in. You will find lots of testimonials there. All of the folks, I'll tell you what, I was talking in one of my groups today. I do Q&A sessions, which you can also get into and talk with me personally on Zoom, which I love to do, by the way. But I was talking and I was telling the group that I am blown away by the magnitude and the heart of the people that I've pulled together in my community. I'm not taking credit for it. What I'm saying is that the people in there are amazing. People with massive hearts who want to help, who have been courageous enough to dig in to their own grief. And you will see their videos on my channel here. Every one of the folks that does a video with me on my channel, they've been through the grief process. They've been through my courses. We've worked together on all of the things and they've gotten support. So let me run through the 5 tips to navigating grief and loss for you again. Tip number 1, grieving is hard. I think you know that. Tip number 2, you have to grieve. You have to get your grief out. You can stuff it down, but eventually it will come right back up to haunt you. Tip number 3, connect with others. It is in connecting with other people that we heal. Tip number 4, let's have a plan. Let's put a plan in place. Let's set some goals and let's get to work. Let's do the work of grief. And tip number 5 is find support. There is no need anymore to do this grief journey alone, to navigate grief and loss alone. I want you to come to the community, find us, join us, share your story, listen to other people's stories. Together, we can ease the pain of your grief and we can figure out how to keep on living. Thank you so much for watching. In the next video, we are going to talk more about support and how important that support is. So we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive to give you the ideas that you need to make sure that you can heal.